Deep inside a cave system untouched for millions of years, explorers discover crystal formations so massive they look computer-generated. And then there are the moments science still struggles to fully explain. A radio signal arriving from deep space with no confirmed origin. A sound recorded beneath the ocean so powerful it was heard thousands of kilometers away. A biological fungus that hijacks living insects and controls their bodies after infection. Every single one forced people to confront the same realization. There are parts of this planet and parts of reality itself that humans were never fully prepared to see. Today, we're counting down 43 of the strangest, most disturbing, and most unbelievable things ever captured, discovered, or recorded. 43. The door to hell. In the middle of the Karakum Desert in Turkmenistan sits a crater that has been burning continuously for more than 50 years. Locals call it the door to hell. The crater formed in 1971 after a Soviet drilling operation accidentally collapsed into a massive underground natural gas cavern. To prevent toxic methane from spreading into nearby areas, scientists reportedly ignited the gas expecting the fire to burn out within days. It never did. The crater is roughly 230 feet wide, and flames still erupt from its interior day and night. Standing near the edge feels unnatural because the heat hits long before the crater fully comes into view. At night, the entire desert glows orange. The strangest part is that nobody expected it to last this long. For decades, the fire continued consuming underground gas reserves beneath the desert floor, turning a drilling accident into one of the most surreal locations on Earth. 42. The bloop. In 1997, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration recorded one of the loudest underwater sounds ever detected. It became known simply as the bloop. The sound was so powerful that underwater listening stations thousands of kilometers apart all detected it. Analysts determined that the source came from somewhere deep in the southern Pacific Ocean. At first, nobody knew what produced it. The audio did not resemble earthquakes, submarines, or known marine animals. Because of its immense volume, some speculated that the source could have been a living organism far larger than any whale ever discovered. For years, people connected the sound to deep-sea monsters and Lovecraft-inspired theories about unknown creatures hiding beneath the ocean. Scientists later concluded the sound was most likely caused by massive ice fractures in Antarctica. But even after the explanation, the recording itself still sounds deeply unsettling, especially because it came from one of the least explored regions on Earth. 41. The Cave of Giant Crystals. In 2000, miners in Nica, Mexico accidentally discovered one of the most alien-looking environments ever found underground. A hidden chamber filled with enormous crystals. Some stretched over 35 feet long and weighed more than 50 tons. The cave formed over hundreds of thousands of years under extremely specific conditions involving mineral-rich groundwater and stable temperatures. The result looked less like geology and more like a science fiction set buried beneath the earth. But entering the cave came with a serious problem. The temperature inside reached nearly 58 degrees Celsius with extremely high humidity. Humans could survive inside for only short periods before overheating became fatal. Explorers entering the cave needed specialized cooling equipment just to remain conscious. Without it, the human body begins shutting down frighteningly fast. 40. The parasite that controls ants. Deep in tropical forests, a fungus called Ophiocordyceps infects ants and slowly takes control of their bodies. The process sounds fictional. It isn't. Spores enter the ant's body and spread internally. Over time, the fungus alters the insect's behavior, forcing it to leave its colony and climb vegetation above the forest floor. Then the ant bites down onto a leaf or branch in what scientists call a death grip. After the ant dies, the fungus erupts from its body and releases new spores onto the forest below. Researchers studying the fungus discovered that it effectively manipulates the ant's nervous system to maximize fungal reproduction. Nature created something disturbingly close to biological mind control. 39. The deepest hole ever dug. The Kola super-deep borehole in Russia remains the deepest artificial point humans have ever reached inside Earth's crust. Scientists drilled for nearly 20 years. Eventually, the borehole reached over 12 kilometers deep. What they discovered surprised researchers repeatedly. Temperatures were far higher than expected, reaching levels that made deeper drilling nearly impossible. Rock formations behaved differently under extreme pressure, and microscopic fossils were discovered far deeper underground than scientists predicted. But the project also generated bizarre rumors. Stories spread online claiming researchers heard screams coming from deep beneath the earth after lowering microphones into the borehole. The story was fictional, but it spread so widely that many people still believe it today. The real discoveries were already strange enough without the internet adding demons to the story. 38. The lake that turns animals to stone. Lake Natron in Tanzania looks beautiful from a distance. Up close, it becomes terrifying. The lake contains extremely alkaline water with a pH level high enough to chemically burn skin and eyes. Temperatures can also become dangerously hot. Animals that die near the lake sometimes become preserved through calcification, leaving behind hardened bodies that appear almost petrified. Photographs of birds and bats preserved near the shoreline spread online because they looked like statues frozen in place. Despite this, some species actually thrive there. Flamingos use the lake as a breeding ground because the harsh conditions keep many predators away. It is one of the few places on Earth that looks openly hostile to life while simultaneously supporting it. 37. The hum. Around the world, small groups of people report hearing a persistent low-frequency sound known simply as the hum. Not everyone can hear it. Those who do describe it as a distant engine idling somewhere far away. The sound often becomes more noticeable at night and can continue for years. Reports emerged from places including the United Kingdom, Canada, and New Zealand. Scientists proposed several explanations including industrial machinery, low-frequency vibrations, power infrastructure, and even psychological factors. But no single explanation accounts for every case. For some people, the sound became so constant that it disrupted sleep, concentration, and mental health. The unsettling part is not just the noise itself. It is the fact that in many cases only certain people standing in the exact same location can hear it at all. 36. The moving rocks of Death Valley. For decades, massive rocks in Death Valley appeared to move across the desert floor completely on their own. Long trails stretched behind them in the dry lakebed mud, proving the rocks had shifted position over time. Nobody ever directly witnessed it happening. That mystery lasted for decades. Some proposed magnetic anomalies, others blamed supernatural forces. Researchers finally solved the mystery using GPS tracking and time-lapse photography. Under rare conditions, thin sheets of ice formed beneath the rocks during cold nights. When sunlight partially melted the ice, wind slowly pushed the rocks across the slick surface. The movement was extremely slow, which explains why almost nobody ever saw it directly. Even with the explanation, the images still look impossible. 35. The fish with a transparent head. In the deep Pacific Ocean lives a fish so strange that early photographs look digitally altered. It is called the barrel-eye fish. Its head is transparent. Inside the clear dome are tubular eyes capable of rotating upward to detect prey above it in the darkness of the deep sea. For years, scientists misunderstood how the fish's eyes functioned because preserved specimens became damaged during collection. Only later footage from remotely operated submarines revealed what the creature actually looked like: a live dot. The deep ocean repeatedly produces animals that look less evolved and more invented, and most of them still live in regions humans have barely explored. 34. The Dyatlov Pass Incident. In 1959, 9 experienced hikers died under mysterious circumstances in the Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. The case became one of the most debated survival mysteries in modern history. Investigators discovered that the group had cut their way out of their tent from the inside before fleeing into freezing temperatures during the night. Some bodies showed severe trauma. Others were found without adequate clothing despite the extreme cold. Over the decades, theories ranged from avalanches to military testing to paranormal explanations. Modern investigations now suggest a rare slab avalanche likely triggered the disaster. But several details still continue fueling debate online decades later, especially because the scene investigators found looked less like an ordinary survival accident and more like panic. 33. The signal that came back from deep space. In 1977, a radio telescope at Ohio State University detected a narrowband signal from space that lasted for 72 seconds. The signal was so unusual that the astronomer reviewing the data circled it on the printout and wrote a single word next to it: "Wow." The signal appeared to come from the Sagittarius constellation. It did not match known natural radio sources like pulsars, quasars, or solar activity. Its intensity and structure suggested something narrow, focused, and non-random. Follow-up observations were conducted for years, but the signal never repeated. Without repetition, scientists could not confirm a source. That single burst remains one of the strongest unexplained radio detections ever recorded. 32. The lake that burns without fire. Lake Nyos in Cameroon looks like a normal volcanic lake on the surface. In 1986, it released something invisible. A massive cloud of carbon dioxide suddenly erupted from the lake bed and flowed downhill into nearby villages. The gas displaced oxygen in the air, causing rapid suffocation in surrounding areas. More than 1,700 people died within hours. Livestock and wildlife were also affected across a wide radius. The event was later explained as a limnic eruption, where dissolved gases accumulate under pressure and suddenly release. But what made it difficult to grasp was how silent it was. There was no explosion, no visible warning, just a gas cloud moving through valleys and removing oxygen from everything it touched. 31. The forest where trees grow in circles. In western Siberia, satellite images revealed a forest pattern that looks artificial from above. Thousands of trees are bent into circular formations, creating shapes that resemble rings across the landscape. Scientists studying the region found that the pattern comes from soil composition and underground mineral structures affecting tree growth over long periods. But from the air, it looks like something deliberately designed. The scale makes it difficult for the human brain to interpret as natural at first glance. 30. The ice that sings. In polar regions, ice sheets sometimes produce low-frequency sounds that travel across frozen surfaces. These sounds are created when wind interacts with cracks and tension inside the ice. Researchers recorded the phenomenon and found that the ice can produce tones that shift in pitch depending on temperature and pressure. To human listeners, it can sound like a distant choir or a slow mechanical hum moving under the ground. It is not music. It is structural stress being released through vibration. 29. The man who heard the ocean from inside a wall. In coastal buildings near heavy surf zones, low-frequency ocean waves can travel through solid structures. In one documented case, residents reported hearing rhythmic sounds inside walls during storms. Investigations found that ocean wave energy was transferring through building foundations and amplifying inside enclosed spaces. The sound was not coming from inside the house. It was coming from the ocean itself, traveling through materials humans normally assume are solid and silent. 28. The cave that breathes. In a remote region of New Mexico, a cave system was recorded shifting air in and out in a slow cycle. Sensors placed inside detected periodic airflow that did not match external wind patterns. The cave system behaves like a pressure equalization system, where underground chambers expand and contract due to temperature changes. To early visitors, it felt like the cave itself was breathing. 27. The jellyfish that never touches land. The immortal jellyfish, Turritopsis dohrnii, is a species capable of reverting its cells back to an earlier stage of development. Instead of dying in a typical cycle, it can reset its biological state under stress. This process allows it to bypass aging in a way that has no clear limit under ideal conditions. Scientists study it for insights into cellular regeneration, but the mechanism is still not fully replicated in other organisms. It is one of the few known animals that does not follow a fixed biological lifespan. 26. The desert glass fields. In parts of the Sahara Desert, large areas of natural glass exist scattered across the sand. These formations were created by ancient meteor impacts that melted surface sand into glass under extreme heat. The glass fragments can stretch across wide regions, forming a landscape that reflects sunlight in sharp, unnatural ways. It is a permanent record of high-energy impact events that reshaped the ground instantly. 25. The city that disappeared underwater twice. The ancient city of Dwarka in India is associated with archaeological findings underwater near the modern coastline. Structures have been found submerged beneath the sea, suggesting coastal shifts over long historical periods. Sea level changes and geological movement likely contributed to repeated submergence events. The site remains under study, with ongoing debate about timelines and reconstruction of ancient settlement patterns. 24. The snow that falls without clouds. In Antarctica, researchers have observed snowfall patterns that occur in conditions where visible cloud cover is minimal. This happens when fine ice crystals form from humidity and freeze directly in the atmosphere. To observers on the ground, it can look like snow appearing out of clear air. The process is known in atmospheric science, but visually it remains difficult to interpret when seen directly. 23. The rock that rolls itself. In Death Valley, certain rocks have been observed moving across flat terrain, leaving long tracks behind them. The movement occurs under rare combinations of ice formation and wind conditions. The rocks can shift direction slowly over time, creating overlapping trails that suggest repeated movement events. Time-lapse studies confirm the mechanism, but the visual effect still looks unnatural without context. 22. The sound that travels through bone instead of air. In some caves and underwater environments, people report hearing sound without being able to locate a source. Researchers found that low-frequency vibrations can travel through rock and water in a way that bypasses normal hearing cues. Instead of entering through the ears alone, these vibrations are picked up through the skull and body. The result is disorienting because the brain cannot assign direction properly. A sound is heard, but it does not behave like something moving through space. It feels like it is already inside the listener. 21. The river that separates cleanly into two colors. In several parts of the world, rivers have been observed where two water systems meet but do not immediately mix. One side can appear darker due to sediment, while the other remains clear for long visible stretches. This happens because of differences in temperature, density, and flow speed. In certain locations, the boundary line between both waters is sharp enough to be seen from above. It creates the impression of two rivers flowing side by side in the same channel without combining immediately. 20. The forest that repeats its own shape. In northern climates, some forests show repeating patterns when viewed from satellite imaging. Tree density forms clustered shapes that mirror each other across terrain sections. This is influenced by soil composition, wind exposure, and water distribution over long periods. From ground level, nothing looks unusual. From above, the repetition becomes obvious enough to look artificially arranged. 19. The cave where air moves against you. In certain underground systems, airflow behaves in reverse compared to surface expectations. Instead of wind entering passages, air is pushed outward in pulses depending on temperature shifts between chambers. Explorers entering these caves have reported sudden gusts that feel like exhalations from deep inside the rock. Sensors confirm that pressure differences between connected cavities cause this effect. The cave is not alive, but it reacts in a way that feels like it is breathing out. 18. The ice that moves like a living surface. In polar lakes, sheets of ice sometimes crack and drift across water in large connected plates. When wind interacts with these plates, they can shift slowly while still remaining intact. The movement produces shifting reflections and grinding sounds underneath. From a distance, it looks like the entire surface is moving as a single organism. The lake remains frozen, but the ice no longer stays still. 17. The fish that survives being frozen. Certain Arctic fish species produce proteins that prevent their blood from freezing in sub-zero water. This allows them to survive conditions that would destroy most biological systems. In some cases, parts of their bodies can partially freeze and then recover when temperatures rise. The process is not suspended animation. It is active chemical control over ice formation inside living tissue. 16. The desert that changes shape overnight. In sand dune systems, wind patterns can reshape entire landscapes within hours. Large dunes shift position depending on wind direction and strength. Satellite comparisons taken days apart show visibly different terrain structures. What looks like stable geography is actually in constant motion. Entire regions slowly rewrite their surface layout without any visible event. 15. The ocean that produces perfect circles. In certain coastal regions, wave interference patterns create circular ripples that appear too structured to be random. These patterns form when multiple wavefronts collide at precise angles. The result can look like expanding rings across the ocean surface. From above, the geometry appears deliberate. From below, it is only physics interacting across distance. 14. The volcano that emits blue fire. At Kawah Ijen in Indonesia, sulfuric gas escaping from volcanic vents ignites upon contact with oxygen. This produces blue flames that flow across the ground at night. The fire is not lava, it is burning gas. Workers in the area extract sulfur directly from the site under extremely hazardous conditions. The environment produces visible combustion that looks unnatural even in person. 13. The cave system that has no endpoint. In Vietnam's Son Doong cave system, chambers are large enough to contain entire ecosystems. Inside, clouds form due to temperature differences between cave zones. Rivers flow through underground corridors that extend beyond full exploration limits. Some sections have not been fully mapped due to scale and accessibility. Standing inside, the environment no longer feels like a tunnel. It behaves like a hidden world beneath the surface. 12. The mountain that creates its own weather. In Venezuela, Mount Roraima rises above the surrounding rainforest like a flat stone plateau cut off from the world below. At the top, weather does not behave normally. Clouds form directly across the surface even when the sky above looks clear. Rain can fall in one section of the mountain while another remains dry only a short distance away. This happens because the mountain's height forces air currents upward, cooling moisture rapidly until it condenses into cloud systems. What makes it unusual is how localized it becomes. Weather can exist in one section of the plateau without affecting another section only a few hundred meters away. It creates separate atmospheric conditions on the same surface at the same time. 11. The boiling river in the Amazon. Deep in the Peruvian Amazon, researchers documented a geothermal river system where water temperatures reach levels high enough to cause severe burns. The river is heated by underground geothermal activity, with hot water rising through cracks in the Earth's crust. Temperatures vary along its length, but some sections become hot enough to cook organic material instantly. Local communities were aware of it long before scientific studies confirmed its source. What makes it visually striking is the contrast between dense rainforest surroundings and water that behaves like a natural thermal vent. A river running through a living jungle, carrying heat strong enough to change matter on contact. 10. The sand that behaves like a liquid. Certain desert regions contain sand that does not behave like stable ground when disturbed. Under pressure, it can temporarily act like a fluid, shifting and collapsing beneath weight. This happens due to fine particle structure and air gaps between grains. When vibration or force is applied, the structure destabilizes and behaves like a flowing surface. The result is terrain that looks solid until it suddenly stops acting like solid ground. Vehicles and equipment can sink unexpectedly in these areas when conditions align. 9. The deep ocean lights. In multiple coastal regions, divers have reported glowing patches of light appearing in open water at night. Scientific explanations point to bioluminescent plankton that emit light when disturbed. When large concentrations gather, movement from waves or marine life can trigger synchronized glowing across wide areas. From the surface, it appears as if sections of the ocean are lighting up on their own. The light has no external source, only biological reaction. It is not artificial. It is the ocean responding to motion. 8. The cave where sound never returns. In certain underground formations, explorers report that sound behaves differently depending on direction and chamber shape. Some cave systems absorb echoes almost completely due to irregular rock surfaces. Instead of sound bouncing back, it is dispersed and weakened until it disappears. This creates conditions where footsteps, voices, and even shouting do not return as echoes. The result is a space where sound feels incomplete, as if it stops before coming back. It removes one of the main cues humans use to understand space. 7. The ice that falls like rain underground. In cold cave systems, formations known as ice speleothems can form when freezing air meets moisture inside underground chambers. Under the right conditions, ice structures grow downward from ceilings in thin formations. When temperature shifts occur, small pieces can break off and fall like frozen debris. To early explorers, it appeared as if ice was forming and collapsing inside a sealed environment with no direct weather exposure. The process is driven entirely by airflow and temperature differences between surface and underground systems. 6. The forest that moves without human interaction. In some wetland regions, floating vegetation mats slowly shift position over time. These mats are made of dense plant material that grows across water surfaces. Wind, current, and seasonal changes can gradually move entire sections of vegetation across a lake or swamp. From aerial views, it can look like land is slowly rearranging itself. No human activity is involved, only long-term environmental pressure reshaping the surface layer. 5. The creature that can rebuild its entire body. The planarian flatworm has the ability to regenerate large portions of its body after severe injury. In laboratory conditions, some species can regrow missing sections, including internal structures, under controlled environments. This regeneration is driven by stem cell activity distributed throughout its body. Researchers study it to understand tissue repair mechanisms in more complex organisms. It is one of the simplest known biological systems capable of rebuilding itself after extreme damage. 4. The desert that sings at night. In certain dune fields, sand movement under wind pressure can create audible low-frequency sounds. When large sand masses shift, friction between grains generates vibration. This produces tones that can travel across open desert areas. The sound can vary in pitch depending on grain size and wind speed. To people standing nearby, it can sound like a deep humming or distant mechanical resonance coming from the ground itself. It is not an artificial sound. It is motion translated into vibration. 3. The place where rain stops mid-air. In parts of South America, there are regions where rainfall behaves in ways that do not look consistent from a single viewpoint. During heavy storms, dense vegetation and uneven terrain can block rainfall in specific zones, while nearby areas receive full exposure. From a distance, this creates sharp boundaries where one section of land is soaked and another remains almost dry. It happens because rainfall is not perfectly uniform. Wind direction, canopy density, and terrain elevation all affect how water reaches the ground. To someone standing inside it, the change is immediate. A few steps can move a person from heavy rain into near silence under a natural cover. It is not two weather systems. It is one system shaped unevenly by the surface it falls on. 2. Split into two directions. In polar and high-altitude regions, atmospheric conditions can bend and reflect light in ways that distort the horizon line. Under specific conditions, layers of air with different temperatures refract light unevenly, creating visual separation between sky sections. This can make the sky appear divided, with one layer showing normal color and another appearing stretched or displaced. It is caused by temperature inversion, where cold and warm air layers sit on top of each other and bend light at different angles. The result is a sky that does not behave as a single continuous surface. It looks segmented even though it is one atmosphere. 1. The door that appears where no door exists. Across multiple historical accounts and modern reports, people have described sudden visual anomalies during low light conditions, fatigue, or extreme environmental exposure. One of the most repeated categories involves briefly seeing structured shapes in reflective surfaces, shadows, or natural rock formations that resemble architectural openings. In all verified cases studied by researchers, these events are linked to a combination of perception limits, lighting conditions, and brain pattern recognition under stress or reduced visibility. The human brain is built to recognize familiar structures quickly, even when details are missing. That system can sometimes create a complete object from incomplete visual information. What makes these reports interesting is not the idea of something appearing that is not there. It is how consistently the brain tries to complete patterns when information is missing. The environment does not change. Perception does. Across every entry in this list, the same pattern appears again and again. Natural systems behave in ways that are precise, physical, and explainable, but still difficult for the human brain to interpret instantly without context. Water moves according to pressure and terrain. Ice forms under temperature gradients. Sound travels through materials we do not normally associate with hearing. Life adapts to conditions that appear impossible from a surface-level view. Nothing in this list required fiction. Everything came from systems already operating on Earth, in space, or inside living organisms. The only thing that changes is how closely you look at them, because the closer you get, the more reality stops matching the simplified version most people carry in their heads.